Greetings to all you Yankee fans. My name is J.D. Freda, and I'm one of the co-hosts of the Porch Podcast. Now, before we get into it, I'd like to let you all know that we ran into a few audio difficulties this week. It's our first week. It's our first time doing this. Our audio recording software worked on the first test run. On the second time around, not so much. So in this episode, you'll hear me very loudly. You'll hear my co-host Jared Peterman very low. And you'll also hear me breathing as heavy as Shrek dancing with Fiona at his prom. However, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Porch Podcast. We have invested in new recording equipment for the show going forward, as well as rectified the audio software issue for next week's show. However, there's a lot of great tidbits in here, great information, and great stuff for Yankee fans. So I hope you do enjoy this first episode of the Porch Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Porch Podcast with your co-hosts Jared Peterman and J.D. Freda. Let's get started.
And welcome. It is Tuesday, March 7th, and you are tuned in to the Porch Podcast, where even Jamie Moyer can rip one 314 down the line. Although opening day is just a few short weeks away, today we celebrate our inaugural episode, and we're going to give you guys a great show. I'm here, my name is J.D. Freda, and my co-host here is Jared Peterman.
Yes, welcome to the show. We're just going to briefly discuss who we are and why we're starting the podcast. We are both juniors in college. We met at LaSalle University, home of alumni Meredith Marokovits.
Oh, fantastic. She's fantastic.
So we're just going to try and come to you each week, give you a rundown of Yankees baseball, what we see, and just have a free-flowing conversation.
That's basically what this podcast is going to be. It's going to be conversational, not very strict with guidelines or anything, but we will make sure to provide you, after the podcast is done, with certain clips, certain start times of when this conversation starts, when that starts, because it's kind of free-flowing here. We like to just discuss things back and forth, but today on the show, we're going to talk about the winter meetings, winter moves that were made, anything that happened before spring training. We'll talk about spring training, a couple recaps up to this point, and we'll talk about some potential regular season lineups and a whole lot more. So, first off, with all of that, we're going to talk about some winter moves and some winter news. Obviously, the big move made for the Yankees was bringing back Aroldis Chapman, and a big cash deal brought him back to the Bronx. Now, Mr. Jared Peterman, what do you have to say on that, bringing Aroldis Chapman back after winning a World Series with the Chicago Cubbies?
I think it's a great move. When they traded Chapman to the Cubs, there was talk already that he would have interest in coming back to the Yankees. And I think all the Yankees fans loved him at the back end of the bullpen. He gives stability there, obviously, with Betances in the setup role, which I think I like more. This gives kind of stability back there. And, they paid him a lot of money, but he's definitely worth every penny as one of the best closers in baseball.
And talking about Betances, we'll get into a little bit about him in a couple minutes, but I agree with you. I think Betances in that setup role, it's much more comfortable for him. I think it's where he should be. Obviously, Aroldis being either one of or the best closers in baseball at the moment, it's kind of hard to argue against the fact that as soon as you heard him having interest coming back to the Bronx, it was kind of hard as a Yankee fan not to want him back here. He was fantastic when he was here last year, and fortunately we have him back. Now, can you speak to a few of the points that were made, a couple of the players we received back in that Aroldis Chapman deal last year with Chicago?
Yeah, well, first, we returned Adam Warren, who was originally a Yankee, traded in the Starlin Castro deal. So the Yankees basically got Starlin Castro for free.
We'll take that.
Still didn't hurt the Cubs. So Warren really helped our bullpen down the stretch last year in the 7th and 8th man role once Chapman and Miller were traded. And then obviously the big score of the deal was Gleyber Torres, the middle infield prospect who won the Arizona Fall League MVP this past fall.
Oh, I love that man.
Yeah, he looks great for the future already. And we also received Billy McKinney, who's been ripping the ball up in spring training. He was a big prospect with the A's, I believe, and then was traded in the John Lester deal. that right?
Billy McKinney, I do remember him. I can't recall right now, but I do remember him being a pretty big prospect. I think he was a top 100 pick. Prospects, he was a big prospect, but then they kind of got low on him after, I remember he had an early season injury and in the minors, and he wasn't regarded as high of a prospect as he was. But now that the Yankees got him as a part of the deal with Gleyber, he's been playing very well. It's actually more than very well, extremely well this spring training. He's been ripping the head off the ball.
Yeah, I just double checked. He was in Oakland. He was a first round draft pick.
Yep.
He was traded to the Cubs. So
Fantastic.
just clearing that up, yeah. But yeah, so the trade, I mean, and then we get Chapman back. So, we sacrificed Chapman for half a season, and then we get him back for a multiple year deal. So I think everything worked out fine there. I don't think the Yankees were really expected to do much damage in the playoffs last year, so they kind of hit the reset button, but I believe it's going to be a quick reset button. What about you?
Of course, I think that with all of the moves being made, a couple of moves that are being made this past season, we brought back Aroldis, obviously, and a lot of people are complaining about the money. I don't think that there's a way you get Aroldis Chapman or even a top closer in this league for anything that isn't significant. And the Yankees have always been willing to spend a significant amount of money. So if you're willing to spend it, at least spend it on someone that's going to bolster that bullpen, which looked so beautiful at the beginning of last season when he returned. And
right.
I think...
I mean, he hasn't really shown any decline in his performance either, so I think the length of the deal might have been the scare to some people.
Right.
Yankees have been burned in the past with longer-term deals, as we saw with Teixeira and A-Rod last season. But I mean, as a reliever who throws 100 miles per hour, I think the years are fine. He'll be worth the money in the long run.
Yeah, don't talk about long-term deals around Yankee fans. They start to get a little creepy. I mean, we're in the midst of a Jacoby Ellsbury deal right now that we're trying to get out from under, but it's not going to happen most likely.
That's right. But now, as we're used to seeing long-term deals, the Yankees actually went with a short-term deal with their other big free agent signing this summer, and that was Matt Holliday.
Matt Holliday, indeed.
And so what are your thoughts on that signing?
Honestly, I thought there weren't many players out there that were veterans that can bat in the middle of the lineup, especially a power lineup like the Yankees are trying to put together right now, that has a veteran mentality and can lead a locker room, can lead a dugout. And I think that's exactly what Matt Holliday is. And I thought that it was extremely smart to bring him on, a short-term contract. He's a veteran. The Yankees are known to bring in veterans, sometimes to a fault. But obviously we're seeing a youth movement this year, coming to the next 2 years, where they're going to see a huge turnaround of a lot of young prospects coming up to the majors. But Matt Holliday is just, I think it was a great move. Brought him in short-term. He's going to mentor those young guys. He's going to put up some numbers in the middle of that lineup. And I think he's going to be a great mentor to all those young kids, as I said. And he could help a sometimes flailing Yankees offense to put some runs on the board. Do you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it was a huge part to get a bat behind Gary Sanchez in free agency. The Yankees are going to rely on Sanchez a lot for power numbers this season. And if the Yankees didn't make this move to get Matt Holliday, I think teams could really pitch around Sanchez and, defer to like a Didi Gregorius, a Chase Headley, and Starlin Castro to kind of produce those numbers in the middle of the order. And I think the Holliday move has been great. He's looked good so far in spring training. I mean, this is a guy who at the bottom of his years are going to hit 20 home runs at least. And, I mean, he is going to be 37, but it's a one-year deal. I don't really see much risk in it. So I think it was a great move.
And bringing in the name of our podcast itself, the Short Porch Podcast, Matt Holliday's been known to have power going both ways. He can pull the ball, but he also has power going to the opposite field. And going to that opposite field, it kind of becomes a Little League World Series baseball park out there in right field as the Short Porch hangs ever so gently over that right field wall. Do you foresee Holliday's numbers maybe spiking a little bit in the past couple of seasons as opposed to this year?
Yeah, I think they can. The big thing with Holliday is always his health. I mean, he only played in 110 games last season, but he still produced 20 home runs. He's already hit one or two out this spring. So I think you can expect 25 home runs from him maybe. I mean, if he's really heating up, maybe he can get closer to 30. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think he definitely will have better numbers than the past 2 years. I mean, he hit 246 last year, and the year before was injury riddled, where he only played 73 games and hit like around 280. So I think you can expect him to, power go up a little bit, maybe bring the average back to that 280 mark, maybe a little over 280, and just really provide stability in the middle of the lineup. What about you?
I agree. Also, another point about that I would like to make is Girardi has been talking about it a lot this spring training. He's been pestered with questions left and right about how he doesn't want the organization to put too much on Gary Sanchez at once. Obviously, he's their young star for the future. They know that. They acknowledge that, but they don't want him to feel pressure having to either duplicate or try and replicate the what he did last year. His workload is going to be a lot. Obviously, they're going to try and get him as many games as possible. But I would like to think that having a Matt Holliday, even having a returning Greg Bird coming back, who we'll talk more about, it's going to help Gary Sanchez relieve a little bit of the pressure off of his shoulders. He's a fan favorite in New York. He's going to be great, and I think it's very understated how these smaller moves, even bringing in a Chris Carter and another veteran with power, are going to help the mentality of Gary Sanchez not having to do it all, not having to rely on him solely for power. And I think those two moves are very understated, in my opinion.
Right, I definitely agree. And then that brings us to the last move of really the offseason, where you talk about the pressure now on Gary Sanchez, and most of that pressure comes from trading Brian McCann to the Astros.
Right.
I think it was a cleansing move. Obviously, Sanchez is the guy moving forward. You clear the spot for him. There's no maybe he catches 3 days out of the week. Maybe he DHs some. They just cleansed McCann from the roster, got some prospects back, and cleared the way for Sanchez. So, what do you think about that move?
I've always been one. Growing up in a time where the Yankees were a lot of busted prospects, a lot of prospects that came up and didn't work out. And so the Yankees, always the spending party, would always spend a lot of money on veterans. I always liked looking for that next young guy to come up. And when I heard about Gary Sanchez a few years ago and coming up in the system, and last year, obviously, when he burst out into the scene, I always call for young players to get more time on the field. Obviously, McCann could have DH'd, but now with Matt Holliday here, it kind of hexes that in a way, in a sense. So I was perfectly fine with McCann going. I liked McCann. McCann was very good for us. He was one of our more productive players at the plate, and I'm very happy that what we got out of him. But I thought it was the right move to make.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So that kind of wraps up the winter moves for the majority of the part.
There's one more thing I want to talk about that actually. Last thing, I just want to get your take on this whole drama scenario with Aroldis Chapman, him, his agent, our president Randy Levine, the Yankees president Randy Levine. What is your take on? He wanted $5 million. Arbitration hearing ended with him receiving $3 million for the season. Randy Levine, Yankees president, who's been in the news before for not so great news purposes, has had some harsh words for Betances' agent, Jim Murray, who I believe also is the agent for Chase Headley, as hilarious as that is.
Right, yeah, you do mean Betances. I think you said Chapman at start, but yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, so kind of a bizarre story. Arbitration's never a fun process, especially with a very good player that the Yankees want to sign long term. I know Jeter had drama with it in the past, and he wasn't really fond of it. I thought it was really weird how Levine handled the whole situation. I mean, the Yankees won the arbitration case. There's no real reason to publicly come out and speak and kind of trash Betances and his agent in the way of handling this. They won the arbitration battle. You got the $3 million you wanted to pay him. That's what you're paying him. So there was no real reason for him to come out and do this. I think fans might be worried that when Betances becomes a free agent, that it could cause some strain. I don't think it'll be that drastic. I think Betances handled it really well in his press conference, and I think his agent handled it really well. I mean, they fired back pretty strong, but his agent did say that they have a good relationship with Cashman and Gene Michael, and that Levine, it's kind of coming out of left field with all these comments. What was your take?
I would have to agree with you. The only question I ask myself now is how bad does this make Randy Levine look further? I mean, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, I could be mistaken, but this is the same guy last year that kind of questioned the quality of fans coming out to the baseball games, which led to the whole John Oliver buying tickets for crazy people dressed in costumes.
Yes,
but
yes.
You're right. I mean, how bad does this make Randy Levine look as our Yankees president? That's what I wanted to get your take on. Because in my opinion, Levine is making the Yankees look like an elitist organization that a lot of people are. I can't put into words sometimes how the way that this guy is running this ball club, or at least being the president of. What is your take on the way he's portrayed, or the way he portrays himself really in the media?
Yeah, it's pretty ugly, Mark. I don't understand either comments. I know you want more fans coming to the games, but I think he did that in the wrong way. And I know you wanted to kind of talk about the Betances arbitration case, but I think he handled that in the wrong way too. I don't know if someone needs to give him like a dictionary, proper words to say or what, but I mean, he comes off strong. I think if he does think of the Yankees as an elitist organization, I mean, he kind of needs to look in the mirror a little bit, because it's been a while since the Yankees have won. It's been a while since they've really done any damage in the postseason, and the free agents that we've brought in have not really panned out the way as expected. So you need to kind of take a step back, like I think how Steinbrenner's done, how Cashman's done, reassess the whole situation and move forward. What do you think?
I could not agree more, my friend. I think you're 100% on the mark. You're completely right. And I think that kind of wraps up the winter moves and the winter news, I would say.
Absolutely. We can hop into spring training. So what's kind of stuck out to you so far that has gotten you excited for the season?
Well, let me just preface anything I'm going to say here with a statement that I love spring training. I know there's not many people that start watching baseball until April, but I love spring training, although it may be the ultimate blue balls of baseball anticipation. But it's definitely a showcase for the younger talent, which is why I was looking so much forward to this year's spring training for the Yankees, because of all the young talent that we have in the organization that's going to come up in the coming years. But obviously, we're going to leave prospects out of it for now. One thing that's been really interesting to continue to watch, obviously, these Yankees pitchers, because the rotation, as we know, has been a question mark. Who's going to take those last two spots with CC, Tanaka, and Pineda at the top three of that rotation? Who's going to take those last two? Could it be Mitchell? Could it be Severino? Could it be Sessa? It could even be Warren, possibly, if they want to take him out of the bullpen, put him in the rotation. I think that's been the most interesting thing so far for me to watch, and I would assume that you have the same thought process on that.
Yeah, I mean, the pitchers are definitely the ones to watch during the spring training season, as there's two spots open. I mean, that's basically half the rotation. Warren didn't look so good today, and Mitchell didn't look great yesterday, and Severino's pitching in the World Baseball Classic. And with Severino being kind of their top pitching prospect, I think it'd be the right move to kind of start him off in the regular season in the rotation, see what he has. If he starts off strong, obviously he's going to stay put. If he doesn't, you can always make that move to a Chad Green, a Brian Mitchell, and Adam Warren, or some of the other guys in the line. But I think Severino should start in the rotation and then leave that fifth spot out for maybe a Sessa or a Chad Green. both guys who started last year for the Yankees down the stretch and, showed some promise. The other thing I kind of look forward to in spring training is some of the veterans so far that have been playing. Holiday's played really well. I think Castro's been hitting the ball well. And then Ellsbury and Gardner have shown glimpses, but I think those two guys, Ellsbury and Gardner, really need to get back to what they're used to doing to make this Yankees lineup even better. What do you think?
Now, I agree. I would have to agree. Now, I want to build off of your statement about Severino. Obviously, he's been a top Yankees pitching prospect for the past few years. Now, obviously, we saw him come up 2 years ago, and he pitched very well down the stretch for the Yankees, which got a lot of fans excited for him to be probably a bottom-of-the-rotation guy for last year. And last year we saw him not pitch so great at the beginning of the season. I believe his ERA spiked over 5. I think it was 5.8.
Yeah, I believe that's true.
Yeah, it was 5.8, I believe, and he didn't look so great. Obviously, but you could tell his stuff looks very good. It just looks underdeveloped to me. It looks like he has the potential to get there. But another thing that plagues him, that plagues so many Yankees pitchers, is the ability or the inability to keep the ball in the park. It just seems to sail on a lot of these Yankee pitchers. Severino, just like the other day, Severino had a start. He could either strike out three batters in an inning, or he could let up a home run, let up a double. It's very wild with him. It's the fact that he has to settle himself down. He has to take a few moments on the mound, get his mind right, get his mind together. But it's things that Yankee fans, they've never been too patient, especially with pitching prospects. You want to go back, talk about Java, but it's, I don't know. I might have to disagree with you on the fact that you have to give Severino that opportunity, even though he is that big pitching prospect.
Well, what I see is he, out of any of the candidates, he has the most electrifying stuff.
Right.
Like, hands down. You can do a lot of things with his pitches. I think he needs to really work on his third pitch and his control, because maybe sometimes he falls in love with his stuff too much and he just doesn't spot the baseball. He just throws it over the plate. And that kind of leads to home runs. But I think if you look for upside, and we're developing these younger guys this season, I think this is the perfect spot to put him in the rotation. I know he struggled last year, and he looked good out of the bullpen sometimes, but I think he definitely needs a rotation spot. That's just kind of my take on it.
So, all right, in that sense of the matter, now you have Severino taking, let's say, the fourth rotational spot. Now we saw another guy who is vying for that fifth spot, which would be Brian Mitchell. He had a tough outing. I believe it was yesterday. He just got hit to death. Now, he's shown that he has some potential as well. What is your take on the battle between him, Sessa, a Green, or possibly an Adam Warren?
Yeah, I think Mitchell's more of a swing guy in the bullpen. I think he's a long relief guy, and then if you need a spot start, you can kind of throw him out there for a few innings and then turn it over the pen. I mean, he has looked good in last spring training. He looked good too before the injury that kind of, put a damper on his season. But I still think he's more of a long relief guy at this point. Maybe later in the season you can work into the rotation, but to start, I'd probably have him in the bullpen. What about you?
I would have to agree with you there. I really like stuff that I've seen from Chad Green. I like Chad Green. I also like Luis Sessa, so either of them working their way into that rotation. I would prefer both of them over Mitchell. As you said, I like Mitchell more as like a long setup guy. He's probably best suited in the pen. I would like to see either Chad Green or Sessa really, really force the Yankees pitching coaches to make a decision by at least a week before the season starts, and really force their hand at putting them in the rotation and make a statement for themselves. One more thing that I want to talk about in this preseason so far, this spring training, is a little bit of, which you don't hear much of when it comes to the Yankees, is trade talk. Trade talk. There's one player in the news recently who has made a couple headlines in the past 2 days for being available from the Yankees organization to be shopped elsewhere. And that would be the ultimate utility man himself, Mr. Robert Refsnyder. Now, what could you see what could you foresee for Mr. Rob Refsnyder? Would you prefer him to stay? He does play almost every position out there on the field, or at least they force him to. And could you see him going somewhere else? Could we get anything back for him?
Even watching him last year, I kind of mentioned to people I know he's like a Brock Holt on the Red Sox. He plays everywhere, which can be valuable. He has a decent bat, but trading him, I don't think you're going to get much back for him. If anything, really. I mean, the way I look at it, why give a guy away for free when you could maybe use him if an injury happens, where he can play everywhere. And it's not like Ronald Torreyes is like a stone lock on the Yankees roster. If he struggles in the season, maybe Refsnyder can take his role playing all over the diamond. I don't know. I don't see much value in trading him. I don't see him providing much value as a player, so it's kind of a push for me. What about you?
I would agree with you. The only reason I would say for Refsnyder possibly to go is obviously just emptying up a little more room on the roster for a young guy or maybe another pitcher to be in that pen. But as you said, I think it was a very great point that you made, that why trade a guy who can do a lot for you when you're probably not going to get much back for him? If the value of his play is more than the value that you can get back, then there's no possible way that you can make a trade that's going to benefit you. But one thing actually that my friends made me aware of is someone wrote on one of the River Avenue Blues game threads the other day during a spring training game that Robbie Refsnyder in 2 years went from a guy that was being blocked to a guy that's blocking prospects. And I don't think I've laughed harder in the past 2 weeks. It's
the Yankees love to overhype a prospect here and there, and I'm glad that the trades they have made this past season has maybe warranted the hype.
Right. So now that we're talking about spring training, obviously for a lot of Yankee fans, spring training this year was all about the prospects. Now, I would like to rattle off a few prospect names and get both of our takes on them, if that's okay.
Of course.
So first one we're going to be talking about, just had in that bat a few minutes ago, where we're talking about the Red Rocket, Mr. Clint Frazier.
Yeah, I'm excited about Clint Frazier. The ETA on him in the big leagues is maybe unknown just because of Ellsbury and Gardner kind of having outfield spots. So you could think maybe if the Yankees don't have a very good season, they trade one or two of those guys and clear spot for Frazier maybe this year, or if he's just a September call-up later in the season. But I'm excited for Clint Frazier. I know Brian Cashman, he raves about what...
Oh, he loves him.
Legendary bat speed, he says. I mean, he looks great at the plate. I can't be more excited for when he comes, but definitely let him grow in the minors a little bit. And I know Frazier, from every interview he's done, is just ecstatic about being a Yankee.
I would have to completely agree with you, and that is a great point. Cashman does talk about his bat speed a lot. When you watch him at the plate, his bat just seems to cut through the zone like a hot knife through margarine on a nice sunny afternoon in the southern heat. It's beautiful. It's really a beautiful thing. He's obviously in the top 100 baseball prospects, as are a couple other of these prospects we're about to talk about. He's one of the most exciting prospects that the Yankees have. He's a short, quick, fast swinging, has a little pop to his bat. Almost everything you can ask for in a prospect, and I know Yankee fans are looking forward to seeing him being called up. Now, one thing you brought up was those outfielders having to there needs to be a spot for him. If he's going to come up, there has to be a spot for him to come up for. He's possibly an injury, as happens every year. But can you foresee, after not moving Gardner in the offseason, can you see them moving a Gardner, maybe moving a Hicks for a smaller deal, to open up a spot for Clint Frazier to come up?
You didn't, and the thing is, you didn't mention Ellsbury in there, which I
Correct.
think is valid because the contract is just so big that I don't see them getting rid of him. But if the Yankees get off to a slow start and they're in the middle of August and they're looking at not making the playoffs again like they did last year, yeah, I think Brett Gardner's definitely on the move. And you can see Frazier up this year, but if they're competing and they're in the mix for the wild card race, I think Gardner probably sticks around. He's the longest tenured Yankee on the team, and I think I know Girardi loves Gardner, and I think the Yankee organization respects him a great deal. So unless they're really falling out of the standings, I don't see them trading Gardner if it didn't happen in the offseason. But Clint might have to wait until September, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I would have to agree. If he comes up this year, he's coming up later in the season. I think the only way Gardner moves, he's so loved and respected by not only the organization but the fans as well. I know a lot of fans are antsy to see the younger guys come up, but Gardner's been a constant for Yankee fans in the past 10 years. He's a seasoned guy. His production slips off at times in different areas, but he's always consistent, whether it's in the field or at the plate at times and in streaks. So I can't see them moving Gardner unless, as you said, there's a scenario where they're not going to make the playoffs. Yankees fans are starting to rumble, and they want the young guys to come up now, whether that be for the better or for the worse. But I could only see Gardner being moved if, as you said, the Yankees aren't going to make the playoffs, which could open up a spot for Clint Frazier. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is a guy that's Yankees coaches are talking about. They like him at the plate. He's another guy who with a good bat. I'm talking about Miguel Andujar. What do you think about Mr. Miguel coming through spring training so far?
Yeah, I haven't watched a ton of him. I saw a few at bats today. I know he's had some production early in spring training. He's still a little younger, but I think that's a guy that could eventually come up, maybe replace Chase Headley in a year and a half, maybe. I can't speak too much on him as I haven't seen too much from him. But I mean, I like the swing that I've seen on a few at bats. What about you?
Yeah, no, I do like him. A lot of coaches raved about him. Last year, I believe he was in high A ball, if I'm not mistaken. But if I can recall, he played a little bit under 60 games. I think he hit 10 or 11 homers, batted around 285. So you're probably not going to see a high average hitter, but maybe he's got some pop to that bat that can just add a little more. The Yankees obviously have had a hitting power third baseman in Alex Rodriguez for the longest time. Now they have Chase Headley, who is Chase Headley, and so it would benefit them for a young third baseman to come up and possibly be another part of this young Yankee turnaround team.
Right. And let's just move into the main prospect that everyone has been raving about in Gleyber Torres.
I thought
came over in the Chapman trade. So far in spring training, you've seen him move over the diamond a little bit, playing some second, some short, some third. One interesting tidbit I heard on Yes Network is that the Yankees want to keep him in the middle of the diamond. They don't want him playing third base, and it was suggested that if he does come up this year or next year, that Starlin Castro would move to third base and Torres would play second base. So what have you seen so far, and what do you think about that?
I think Gleyber's looked fantastic. I think the hype is warranted. Funny enough, when you said the Yankees' main prospect everyone's talking about, immediately Ji-Man Choi came to mind. But I'm assuming I assumed that you weren't talking about him. But so Gleyber's look great. Obviously, they want to keep him in the middle of the infield, short or second. I could definitely see him coming up either this year or next year and forcibly moving Starlin to third if he does come up this year. And I would be fine with that. I think he has a lot of potential. I would like to see him progress a little bit more in the minor leagues before he does come up. And kind of pairing him, I'm going to kind of pair him with another guy who plays middle infield for was a huge prospect last year during spring training. Obviously, that's Jorge Mateo. A lot of people were talking about him, and he's still a good prospect in our minor league system, although playing a little under par last year. But there's been talk of him maybe moving around a little bit, maybe playing a little bit of outfield, playing elsewhere to clear spots for, obviously, a Gleyber Torres. What are your thoughts on, can he progress? Can he progress enough where the Yankees eventually call him up maybe in a year? And if so, does he play somewhere else than the infield?
Well, first on Glaber, I think it's up to him whether he's getting called up this year. I think he can really force the Yankees' hand late in the season and make them bench a Chase Headley or a Starlin Castro. Both of them were dangled in trade talks this winter. So I think if Torres is showing, his production in the minors, he can really force the hand and get called up this year. It might not be till later, but I think that's in play. When you talk about Mateo, I mean, he's got a good swing on him. He's fast. So the outfield does seem like a spot where he can play. Whether he gets called up this year or not, I don't know. It's going to be really hard to tell. I think the record of the team really matters, and I think the production of the starting players on the Yankees matter, along with his production in the minors. So it's going to be interesting. He kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit when the Yankees made all these trades for the prospects, like Torres and Frazier and the others, but I think he still has some standing ground in the organization, and he can definitely, maybe he's a guy if Ronald Torres doesn't, show enough.
Right.
He gets caught up and he's the utility guy.
Right.
So I think that maybe is his ceiling for this season, but that's a valuable role in many ways.
Oh, of course it is. We've seen a lot of guys come up as role players for the Yankees and make an impact, whether it be coming up and filling in for an injured player, coming up and maybe even making a big pinch hit late in the season to start a momentum swing. But, yeah, I agree with you. I think Mateo can be that guy, but he has to progress further down the minor leagues first. Now, a guy that you alluded to beforehand, you actually talked about him quite a bit, Billy McKinney, former A's prospect, drafted in the first round, as you said. He's been playing extremely well for the Yankees. What do you foresee his future in pinstripes? Does he come up to the Bronx at any time next season? Is he a legit prospect in this big pool of prospect for the Yankees?
I think that's going to be the question with a lot of these guys. The Yankees, they have so many prospects right now where, you don't know who's going to come up. There's definitely going to be trades made, maybe not this year, but in the coming years where some of these guys that have been hyped up might get traded for a bigger name, a more established name. And, it's kind of too early to tell with McKinney right now. I mean, he's looked really good in the spring. He was, in a way, kind of a throw-in in the Chapman trade, but he's had the rankings before from, being a top prospect. So, I mean, he definitely has potential. He's showed a good spring with power. It's just tough to tell. I don't know. Maybe he could be a fourth outfielder. It really depends on the organization and how they're doing, I think, with a lot of these guys. And maybe if Aaron Hicks or Aaron Judge struggles, maybe a guy like that gets a shot. Maybe he doesn't stick around, but maybe he gets a shot with an injury or lack of production.
Right. Now, we've been talking about pitchers in spring training. Obviously, Chad Green, Sessa, Mitchell, and Severino all vying for that 4 and 5 spot in the rotation. But the younger pitchers, obviously Kaprelian, who has been our number one pitching prospect, and we don't see him in spring training. But what do you think of him maybe progressing towards getting called up later in the season? And how about Jordan Montgomery, who there was a lot of talk about him last summer, possibly being a late call-up guy just for some relief in the pen. He's a big guy. He's pitched pretty well. What do you foresee for both of those guys in the coming year?
Yeah, they've taken it slow with Kaprelian so far. He's coming off injury. He said he's a caged. I think he said something like he's a caged bull right now.
Yeah.
He's ready to get on the mound, and I think it's exciting. It'll be exciting to see him pitch in the spring when he finally does get the chance. I definitely think if he stays healthy and he does what he's expected to do in the minors, that you can see him in the rotation this year because, as we've mentioned, the rotation really isn't a solid starting five right now. There's 2 spots open. So anytime a guy like Severino, Sessa, or Green struggles, he's going to be in line along with Montgomery. I think both of those guys can see starts this season because, Pineda and Tanaka and Sabathia really aren't the most durable starters either. So there is a scenario where both of them get time up in the majors in the rotation or the bullpen. Montgomery, he might be closer. He might be more polished as of terms in like he's pitched longer. So I just think that there's definitely a scenario where both of those guys see starts this year for the Yankees.
And that's a great point that you made, that although Tanaka being one of the best control pitchers and precision pitchers in all of baseball, not the most durable guy for a rotation on the mound. And that was one of the reasons, as you know, that until last year I wasn't the highest on Tanaka, maybe crazily to my detriment. But as you know, we talked about it all the time. You were a big Tanaka supporter. I was not. I kind of dreaded seeing him because I knew it was in my mind, at least, it was inevitable that he was going to get injured at some point, and I just hated that we were paying him all this money for him, in my mind, to eventually get hurt. But he has proved me wrong time and time again. He is a fantastic pitcher, but it's always a question whether he can stay on that mound. And obviously, it's comforting to know that now, if unfortunately there is a possibility, if he does go down later in the season, we have these young guys who can come up, spot start here and there. We still have those Chad Greens and Luis Cessas who have the ability to give us a good start here and there. So I agree with all the statements you've made on Montgomery and Caprelli. And Caprelli, and obviously they're taking a little bit of time with, as they should. And that about wraps up all the prospects that I wanted to talk about. Do you have any others?
No, that pretty much covers it. I mean, Chance Adams was another pitcher that's thrown into the mix, but I think they're going to be slower with him as well. I mean, a Warren, a Mitchell might get a shot at the rotation before a guy even like Montgomery does. So it'll just take time to see a lot of these guys get up there. But the Yankees have pitchers coming that we just need to be patient.
Right. And I think it's a little bit too early to talk about guys like Blake Rutherford, maybe a Justice Sheffield. I think it's a tad bit too early to discuss them. I think their time comes next year.
I would agree. So with that being said, we just want to kind of take a look at the opening day lineup, not necessarily rotation, as we've kind of talked on a lot, that it's still a lot up in the air, but we can kind of see who's going to make the roster on the offensive side and kind of dig into what we are kind of expecting from this lineup. So why don't you start it off?
Well, I'll briefly say this. Girardi's obviously talked about Gary batting maybe in the 2 spot a little bit this year. He's fiddled with the idea of maybe hitting Ellsbury, not at the leadoff, so giving Gardner that position back, maybe hitting Ellsbury a little bit lower in the lineup. But I'm curious as to what you foresee. Obviously, the middle of the lineup is kind of set. Where do you see certain guys fitting in, like a Greg Bird, coming back from injury, hopefully being a big part of this offense?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell right now because if you don't know where Ellsbury is hitting, so if he's hitting 2, that obviously pushes everybody down a line. So if he sticks with Gardner and Ellsbury at the top, Sanchez, Holiday are in the top 4, and then the last 5 guys can certainly jumble around because you have power with Judge, you have Castro and Gregorius who hit 20 home runs last year, you have Headley somewhere in there, and it gets kind of jumbled. So I think they should split Ellsbury and Gardner, and I think you keep Sanchez in the 2 or 3 hole, maybe put a Castro in the 2 hole, just kind of play around with that in the beginning of the season. But I think I would hit Gary Sanchez in the 3, keep Holiday behind him, and Carter and Bird, they'll probably if Carter plays, he'll probably be in the 4 or the 5 hole just because of the pop.
I agree.
He'll probably play against lefties. Where Bird, I mean, I could see him anywhere from 5 to 8 in the lineup. I don't think he has a set spot. What about you?
I would have to agree. So far, the way I have it, the way I foresee it, I would have Gardner, and this is assuming that they're going to keep Jacoby in the 2 spot for now.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, if Girardi wants to do that, we have Gardner at the 1 playing left, obviously. Jacoby in the 2. At center, Gary has to be at that 3 spot, in my opinion. You said you agree with that. Behind the dish, Holiday will probably DH most days. Maybe some days he'll switch out with Judge playing right, or we'll see. Holiday at that 4 spot, batting cleanup. As you said, when Carter's in, because he demands that position, that 5 spot, because of that power, he has the ability to hit 40 homers a year. depending on how many games he plays. But the games he does play, I think he hits in that 5 spot. I think Bird, I could see Bird hitting 1 or 2 spots below that, though. So when Bird plays, I could see him either in the 6 or 7 spot with maybe a Castro, or possibly even sometimes a Judge hitting above him, maybe a Didi. But we'll keep Carter in the lineup for now. If Carter plays first, he'll bat in the 5 spot. I would see Castro at second, batting after him, Didi following up, and then Judge and Headley to close it out. I think it's kind of upsetting, but I don't think Headley can move anywhere from that 8 and 9 range, and I don't think he should.
He really shouldn't, but I mean, there's times last year where you see Girardi put like a Didi or a Headley in the cleanup role,
right?
And you're kind of befuddled, but they come through when they put them there. So I wouldn't be surprised if Headley's in a 6 or 7 spot. I don't think he should be. I mean, he should probably be in that 8 or 9. It's tough to put Judge somewhere down that far because he has the power, but he strikes out a lot.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest question mark, where to put Aaron Judge in the lineup. Hicks is in there, obviously you put him in the 8 or 9 spot and call it a day, but when Judge is in there, it complicates things.
I completely agree with you, and that's why a lot of people are calling for Judge to be in the meat of that lineup, in the middle, towards the middle at least, maybe in that 6 spot at the lowest. But the way I see it is you have that big power group in the middle with Gary providing power, obviously, but then Holiday and Chris Carter or possibly a Greg Bird. But the way I see it, if you bat a Starlin Castro or a Didi Gregorius before Aaron Judge, then they have the ability to get on base, leading or giving way to the possibility for Aaron Judge to bring a few more across the plate. I think that if you bat Judge behind a few guys who can hit in front of him, who can get on base, then I think he has the ability to produce more RBIs, obviously stemming from home runs.
Yeah, I think if you put, say Bird's playing and Bird's in the 5 hole, I think it'd be smart to put him at the 5, then a righty and Castro in the 6. Didi is a lefty, hit him 7th, and then Judge 8, and then have Headley hit the 9, if Ellsbury stays at the top, just to kind of mix that up. But, yeah, it's definitely going to be trial and error throughout the season. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Girardi does with the lineup.
And we know Girardi likes to mix the lineups here and there. He's been known to make some adjustments where he sees fit. So it's kind of hard to tell. We could kind of tell for the first couple games, first few weeks, where everyone's going to kind of fill out. But as the season progresses, obviously with injuries as well, maybe a Torreyes coming in who will force towards the bottom of the lineup. He's going to make a lot of adjustments. As you said, even though I disagree with it, and I don't want to see it, and I probably be the last thing I want to see this year, is Chase Headley batting in the cleanup spot. But I could definitely foresee him at least being moved up to the 5 or 6 spot on days where they have a few guys resting.
Yeah, so one thing I kind of want to touch on with the lineup, I mentioned it earlier that, Didi and Castro each hit 20 home runs last year. They each had, 70 RBIs. Is that something that Yankee fans can expect a repeat in this season? Because, you go back to 2 seasons ago, A-Rod and Teixeira hit over 30 home runs. Coming into last year, Yankees fans kind of expected that to be the pop in the order. Obviously, that didn't happen, and that really created the Yankees to, miss the playoffs. So I think moving into this year, a big thing to watch is, can Didi and Castro provide 40 home runs again?
Right, and I think the Yankees fans should anticipate around 40 home runs, but shouldn't expect around 40. They can anticipate it, and another point that I would say is, I don't think we need a Didi and Starlin to combine for 40, 45 home runs. We have a lot of power otherwise. Obviously, it would help bring across some more runs, possibly win a few more games here and there. But I think the Yankees fans in the Bronx should anticipate around the same production, but not expect, because if they expect and if the coaching staff expects, then we can run into some trouble.
Yeah, and one thing with Castro that he really, really needs to improve on, that, I'll sacrifice a few home runs if he cuts down the strikeouts. He chases a lot of pitches out of the zone. You put a breaking ball in the outside corner, he's going after it, especially with 2 strikes. So if he can kind of, he hit 270, which is, solid. It's not bad by any means, but if he could kind of maybe cut down a few home runs, cut down on the strikeouts, and boost the average to maybe 280. I think that would do a lot of help for us, especially if like a Bird or a Judge is hitting behind him.
I would have to agree. Hopefully Starlin's in there working with Alan Cockwell a whole bunch this offseason. And hopefully we see a significant decrease in that strikeout column and maybe could boost that average up a few points. So now that we've discussed our lineup previews, what we think the lineups are going to be, one more thing I want to touch on, and feel free to interject or add anything at the end of it, is you touched on Greg Bird maybe being moved around in replacing a Chris Carter in the lineup. Now, I want to know, because I've made many a guess, but I can't come to a conclusion. How many games do we see Greg Bird play this year? Girardi's been non-committal about is he the guy at first base, and then obviously we saw them sign Chris Carter, who obviously will play a lot of DH as well. But Raf Snyder, as we talked about, can play first base a lot. He's played first base a lot last year, and other guys have the ability to play first base as well. How many games do we see Greg Bird come out and start at first base for us?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and Jack Curry of Yes Network actually touched on it today. He said that, when the Yankees signed Carter, they told him that your playing time is going to be dictated by Greg Bird's playing time. So if he's hot, you might not hit against the lefty. So, the amount of games he plays is really up to him. So Bird could see 120 games or, 100 games, but it's going to be up to him. I think this is a season of transition for the younger guys. So if Bird's playing hot, they're not going to bench him for a guy who's on a one-year deal. Carter, we didn't spend a lot of money on Carter. It was kind of a low risk, or high reward deal. So we're just going to see what we have with him. But if Bird is, continuing this pop that he showed in the spring, I think he's going to play a lot. Like you said, Carter can play DH. In a pinch, maybe you could throw him in the outfield in a pinch. But I think you can expect Carter to, still get a fair share of time where he can put 20 home runs in the stands at minimum.
I would have to agree with you. Is there anything else that you want to bring up that we haven't touched upon?
I think we covered a lot of the lineup. We talked about the Ellsbury Gardner situation. The middle is pretty stable at this point. I think that kind of wraps up the first episode. Maybe one thing I want to touch on, going forward, we're going to have a few weekly segments, and we'll continue the prospect talk maybe every 2 weeks or so. And just some little background on the intro, the joke of Jamie Moyer being able to hit it down into the short porch. That's going to be a reoccurring thing every week, where we pick a obscure player that played for the Yankees, that can hit one out of the ballpark in Yankee Stadium. So just keep your ears open for that.
Well, Jared might pick someone from the Yankees. I might pick an actor from Hollywood. It doesn't really matter. I think anyone could rip one down the line. One week you might hear me say Jack Black. The next week I might say Rachel McAdams, because honestly they all might be able to rip one to that short porch. But he's right. We'll have a couple of recurring segments, and for all of our loyal listeners, you'll be in on the joke once you hear it 1 or 2 times. And I think that about covers everything that we wanted to cover. Am I right?
Yeah. So next time we'll be talking about the season predictions, and then we'll kind of lead into our rotation preview more so, because I think things will be more set by then. And then we'll look at our regular season award predictions and division winners and World Series. And you can expect that a week or 2 from the regular season.
That is right. And thank you for bringing that up, Jared. And yeah, I want to thank you for listening to the inaugural edition of the Short Porch Podcast. And I also want to thank Ben Sound for our lovely intro song. Ben who? Ben what? Ben Gamel? No, Ben Sound. Thank you for listening. Follow us at Twitter. Jared, would you like to give your handle?
It's just Peterman_24. We'll be posting this to the WordPress website as well. We'll tweet out the links. It'll be on SoundCloud and YouTube. Be sure to follow, subscribe, listen, share it to everyone who's interested in the Yankees.
That's right. Follow us on Twitter, as you said, Peterman_24. I am at AKA the Young Man on Twitter. Obviously, we'll be posting this on our YouTube page. Our YouTube channel is the Short Porch Podcast. And we also have a website, shortporchpodcast.wordpress.com. And I would like to thank you once again for listening. Have a great day. Go out and watch some more Yankees Spring Training baseball and get excited for the season.